Good morning, everybody. It's the March 8th, 2022 koha-US System Admin Special Interest Group meeting. Um, I've just put the agenda in the chat. As usual, it's just kind of three big topics: reports, bugs, and any other topics. And then we'll fill it in with content as we go. As far as reports go, George last month showed off his dashboard that had a bunch of monthly reports using, I think it was unions or maybe multiple selects to put them all in like a nice table. So you had like the branches in one column, and then like the next column was like the checkouts at that branch.
Now this is based on you're asking me the question I asked you to ask in the Slack message you sent me. I couldn't
Yes.
remember what it was you were talking about
Yeah, that's okay.
because
Because you do a lot of reports.
yeah, and we talked about, and I go to a lot of these meetings, and I talked about something at every one of the last few meetings I've been to. So I've got a lot of reports that do that, so probably I'm pulling them up now.
Yeah.
Let's see, statistics. So you were probably asking about something like this one that's loading right now. That's the thing about these big reports, is that they often take a few minutes to run.
Yeah, like one of those ones.
Yeah, so this has got the branches in one column, and it's got the count of items at the start of the month, the end of the month, items added last month, items deleted last month, and total holdings at a library, total bibliographic records. And that's just one of uh, a bunch of reports that I use. And that is the reason I use them, is because by the way that they work, is I start off by getting the branch names from the branch table, and then everything else in here is a subquery that's left joined to the branches, the list of branches. That way, if there's a column where there's a 0, there's still a result.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, if you just do show me if you just run this report, checkouts and renewals last month, if you have a 0, there won't be a line there.
Yeah.
And the reason I like having the 0 there instead of losing that is because if I have the digital content equals 0, then that means that I can just copy and paste all of that content into a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And the lines are going to match every month. If you
Yeah,
drop
even if
out
there's
that, yeah, even if
zeros
there's
there.
0 data, the digital content is going to be whatever line 15 this month and next month and the month after that. Even if there's some of those months there's a result there, and some of the months there isn't a result there, there's always going to be line 15 there. And the advantage that gives me is then I can put it all in a spreadsheet that can be easily accessed. And I have all of that spreadsheet stuff. If you go to our homepage in the staff client, then there's a spreadsheet here. That's going to open in another window. But that data for like January, or I guess February was the most recent month. There's always data, and I can always just plug the data from that spreadsheet into
Yeah,
this
so you can just,
page.
like, I see that those first 6 rows or 7 rows are like that report you were just showing us, so you can just copy and paste that whole.
Exactly. I've actually got it set up so that one report populates these, the next
Mhm.
report populates, I think over to here. This data comes from another report that Hoopla sends us.
Yeah,
And then this is a borrower's report, and this is things transferred between member libraries. So that way I can just run those reports and copy and paste the data into the spreadsheet, and I don't have to worry about, oh, well, there isn't any data from this library this month, so I have to adjust the spreadsheet.
yeah, because I know we used to run reports for a lot of that stuff that was like daily use. I mean, I think we still run them, but we just save them. Um, and I know that was a problem there too, where it would be like, okay, well, you can't just copy and paste it over because they were closed on Sunday and nobody renewed their books remotely.
Yeah,
So there's
yeah,
just
that was
missing
one
days.
thing that I used to do when I did that,
Yeah,
is you'd have to go in and say, okay, I want this to be a month grid, but this branch doesn't match up with the others because there was no data for that day. So you've got to
yeah,
go in there and tweak the data. I have reports that do that too.
yeah.
Um,
I think we just save those now and just put the main reports into our number. We don't do like the day by day stats like we used to, unless we're like considering changing hours.
yeah, and that's why I kept the data that way, is because it
Yeah,
was for figuring out how to assign uh, workers on different days of the week. When did we need more workers?
yeah,
And that's a great thing about getting data. I mean, that's the whole point of getting data. I had a boss at one point that said, well, Saturdays aren't very busy, so we don't need as many people working on Saturdays. And she worked Monday through Friday, and I worked Tuesday through Saturday. And my response was, geez, it sure seems to me like Saturday is awfully busy. And then her response was, well, that's just because there are only 3 people working on Saturday. It's busier like on Thursday and Friday, but it doesn't seem as busy because there's more people here. And so I created reports that could statistically point out that yes, we were checking out more books between noon and 5 on Saturday than any other day of the week. And then her response was, well, it just seems busier because yes, you're checking out more books, but there's fewer people because you have these families come in on Saturday and you have one family that'll check out 50 books. So you're checking out a lot of stuff, but it's not as many people. So then I created reports that said, yes, there are more people checking out materials on Saturday between 12 and 5 than on any other day of the week. And then she could no longer argue with me, and I got more help on Saturdays.
so then we had 3 people all day on Saturday instead of 2 people in the morning and 3 people in the afternoon, uh, which always made for kind of a very busy morning, especially if someone called out sick.
Yeah.
Like on the first Saturday I ever worked, when both people called out sick and me and George ran the library
Yeah,
that
that sounds about
morning.
right.
Well, we were trying to figure out what happened to the second person because their call didn't go through. Like they left voicemail, but it was at the same time as the other person and it got lost.
Yeah, voicemail collision.
Yeah. So that was an exciting Saturday.
But that's always why I try to keep good statistics for things like hourly,
Yeah.
and that is because, it if you're keeping those statistics regularly, you don't have to wait 3 months to go to your boss and say, look at this. Look,
Yeah.
see what I'm telling you is true.
Yeah. And that's why we save them still. We're just not really looking at them much unless we are talking about the hours. But then I
Yeah.
can just go find them and plug them all in. In the chat,
Christy has
Christy
a
asked,
question
oh,
in the chat box. She says, is your report or something like it available on the wiki? I came in late. I don't think this one has ever been put on the wiki, but I don't think there's a reason why I shouldn't put it on the wiki, so I'll put it on there. I don't think there's anything custom in those first 2 reports. that's specific just to next search catalog. A lot of times I don't put reports. Actually, the circulation one is specific to next search catalog because it breaks down adult, children's, and young adult circulation. In next search catalog, we use shelving locations of adult, children's, and young adult, or variations on those three themes as shelving locations, and that's what gives us our adult adult youth breakdown. So that one is probably not a good one to put on the wiki because it's never going to work unless your shelving locations match the authorized values for our shelving locations. I can post a variant of it, but it's not going to work the way that it does for us for
I know,
anywhere else.
yeah, I know that one or two reports that I've posted on the wiki, I've gone in and when it's something like that, I'll put in like all caps, like your shelving location's here. So it's really clear that they can't just copy and paste it. And I'll put like a note in where I'm describing it that like you have to edit it because we used specific authorized values here that are not going to match yours.
Yeah, that
So
that would be a way to go too, I suppose.
thank you, George. Anyone have any other reports they'd like to talk about or questions they've got with reports they're working on? Or...
So totally coincidental, I was asked to write a sort of foot traffic report and I couldn't find one on the wiki. So I'll try and post that in chat. It's not very big. And what that does is breaks it down by month, day, year, and then gives a count of unique borrowers from the statistics table. It only looks at issues since renewals can happen off-site. So it's just an estimation, but it can give an idea of how many unique patrons checked out in a day range on certain days.
Let me find my crazy ass version of that same report. Yeah, I've got one that does something similar, but a lot of the reports that I'm asked to run at the end of a month. And so a report like this is, I mean, this is a perfectly good report, but the thing that makes it not a good one to run at the end of the month is I use the scheduler to schedule a lot of these to run at like 2 o'clock in the morning and just email a report to me. And so you can't do that with any report that has runtime parameters in it.
Yeah.
Because the scheduler can't accept runtime parameters. So I schedule a lot of, I write a lot of reports so that they have the, let's see here. That's loading up, let me find. It's like this one, if I go to edit it, the actual way that I run these is there's subdate now, interval 2 months. There's a whole set of actually I have a report that helps me remember exactly how to write date parameters. And that one, I don't know if I've shared it on the wiki, but I've shared it on Mana. Yeah, I've got a lot of reports, so it takes a minute or two for this page to load sometimes, especially when I'm running a report in the background while it's there we go, date. Oh, it's because I'm on statistics. I'm going to go all. this is my report that helps me keep track of the commands for writing dates. So if you need to get yesterday's date, this is the SQL that gets you yesterday's date. There's yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The first date of last year, the first date of this year, the first date of next year. So I've got, you know, just about every combination of date parameter that I ever might want to use.
And I like that it shows you the current, the like result.
Yeah, it gives
of
you a
that.
result. So year last month, year this month, year next month, month last month. I use these a lot because if I want to get results that show what happened last month, I can just use, you know, what was the year last month and what was the date the month last month, and use those. And that way, on the first of every month when I run those reports, it's always going to ask for the month from last month and the month from last year.
Yeah, that would be great to put on the wiki.
Yeah, I
Since
know that I
it
put it
is.
on Mana, and it's just a big bunch of unions, really. I think it's so big I can't share it in the chat box.
You could put it on the Google Doc if you want at like the end.
Yeah, I'd have to open the Google Doc again.
Yeah, that's fair. Also, putting report stuff into the Google Doc does not seem to be great.
Yeah,
The formatting
avoid
always
that.
gets weird.
Here's my version of what Jason is doing. So on, this covers every day of the month. There's a separate column, and then there's a separate row for each branch. So for Baser, they had on February 1st, they had 87 unique patrons. On Wednesday, they only had 10. What happened on Wednesday? On Thursday, they had 47, 61, 58. That must have been a snowstorm day.
Yeah, a lot of libraries were closed that day.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I've just seen like Baldwin only had 3 and
Yeah, that must have been the
Wanted-
day that we had half the libraries closed because of snow.
yeah.
But this way, there's it does exactly what Jason's report's doing. It's just it's doing it for the entire month, and then it's giving
Yeah.
a monthly total at the end. And there's
You
a
only
row
had one
for
all month. Oh. Corning City Library only had 1 all month.
so it was a busy month for them.
Yeah.
Wow, that's actually kind of sad. One person borrowed the entire month of February, Corning. I can't say that I'm shocked, but yeah, Corning is one of our smallest libraries.
I guess you could do like one of those snip paste bin type things, and we could put the link in
Yeah,
the
I could.
docs in the agenda notes.
I actually have a link to one of those that I use all the time.
That's probably what we should do whenever we're putting reports in, because they never look that great. Although I don't know how long paste bins last. Because I feel like they only last a certain amount of time before. Oh no, you can
I think
set
it depends.
You can set when they expire. So yeah, that's probably a better way to do all the report stuff.
So there you go. There's that date. The date SQL report. So if anybody wants to use that, feel free. And like I said, I did put that on Mana, but just kind of as a way of testing how Mana was working.
Oh wait, that's the...
Now's about the time when I expect somebody to say in the chat box, what's Mana?
I actually have a comment on that, or a question to everybody. I know what Mana is, but trying to get our library to go on board with it has been a bit of a challenge for me. They're asking me what the advantages are, and all I had expressed was subscription serials and also reports. Is there anything else you guys could give me as far as information where I could try to convince everyone that we'd like to be on board with that?
Currently, I have it set up, but I honestly don't use it that much. We don't have any libraries using the serials module, so nobody is going out there and getting subscription data. I think that would be the most useful thing. I think Mana for reports, though, is the difficulty I have with it with reports is that the reports are often less well documented than the wiki. And the wiki, some of those reports aren't super documented well either. But the two issues with Mana and reports are that, number one, there were some reports that were originally uploaded, and Mana treated all of the line breaks in a report. It just erased them. And so sometimes you have one line where the characters from the other line bump up against each other. Instead of replacing the line break with a space, the lines are just smashed up against each other. And so you download a report and the report won't run. And then somebody, I believe, fixed the Mana uploading tool so that when you do have a report that has a line break in it, it is replacing it with a space. But the issue, if you go to Mana and do new report from Mana, new SQL from Mana, I think if you just do a search for a wildcard, you get back a whole ton of results. And the problem is that, let me share again. Like here's a report in Mana called 008 item type check. And it doesn't really tell you, there's no information about the report really. Some of them you see notes. Like here's one, admin Comcat testing needs tweaking. Report courtesy of Bridgewater State need to tweak. So what does that report do? Without taking a look at it, without really downloading it and running it, it's really hard to know what a lot of the Mana reports are doing. There's actually a worse example right next to it. Admin items without I types that have biblio items I types for RT 54778. You can, I think there's a way if you hover over one of these, yeah, if you hover and let it sit still for a second, it'll show you the actual SQL, but a lot of times it's hard to tell from just looking at the SQL. I guess that's my problem with Mana, is that the reports that are in it, you just don't know what you're getting half of the time. So I don't know, does anybody else have any experience with it? I don't think, Jason, you're not using it, are you?
We're not using it.
And Christy left, but I was just gonna say that probably the advantage of Mana is that it's easy to pull reports down, and it's easy to share reports up. So it facilitates some of that Koha community stuff that's sort of harder to do. Because like posting to the wiki, there's a little bit of a barrier. You have to have an account. You have to understand how to post to the wiki. Whereas with Mana, it's just pushing buttons, less copying and pasting. But I agree. There's, it seems, I haven't used it. It seems that it too is a bit clunky in places.
And George, do you know why they're removing the line breaks?
I think it's just part of the process.
Because it seems like, especially with like huge reports, Like
think
some
it
of the
was
stuff.
part of the upload process. I don't know how much it's changed. Actually, let me.
Heather said in the chat, I use Mana. I also try to put a lot of quality metadata-tastic words in the notes when I contribute.
Yeah, and I do the same. I try to make sure that when I'm putting something on Mana, that it actually is something that is going to be useful to people. But I think that's part of the problem, is that when Mana was first available and first turned on, Bywater and a couple of other companies said, oh, we want this to be useful, so we're going to put a lot of content in there, and there wasn't a lot of quality control on what content was uploaded. I know they asked me if I would be willing to let them pump all of the next reports up to Mana. And at the time, we still had over like 1,500 reports. And that was before I had done a big report cleanup. And so we still had reports where like the title was report for Jim and the description was question mark, question mark. And so I knew that that if they just dumped all my reports in there, that it was going to be a lot of bad stuff. And so I think that that was in a rush to make Mana have content. There was a lack of control on the content that was uploaded initially. As for why the uploader was removing the line breaks, I have no idea. But I believe that's been fixed. I believe that it does upload with line breaks now, because I just looked at the date snippets thing that I uploaded, and it seems to look fine when I download it, when I re-import.
Cool. Anyone have any other report things they'd like to talk about today?
I have a report associated with jQuery. I guess I wrote an extremely complex report that gets the item note from a barcode. It's like 3 lines. But then I'm passing that through some jQuery so that the item's public note can show up on the holds queue, because we have some location specific information in the public notes. So like most notably awards books, we've got like a Newbery Award shelf and a William Allen White shelf, but those aren't categorized differently in shelving location. So we need to look at the public note to see where they're actually at in the library. So I worked on some jQuery to pull that information into the holds queue, and I can show what I did. And I did use a report instead of the API for this because I couldn't figure out the API, basically. So the report is this one. It's, like I said, super complex. It pulls the item notes from a barcode. And then I wrote some jQuery that does a bunch of stuff here, but basically it's running that report, pulling the barcode off of the holds queue here, and inserting it into the report. And then it's appending the results from that report, which is the item note, onto the holds queue back here into the notes field that already exists. The reason I haven't been successful with the API is because the item number isn't anywhere on this page. The barcode is, but the item number isn't. So I defaulted back to using reports, which I know is somewhat discouraged, but in this case, it seems to be pretty fast because it's a simple targeted report. So it doesn't bog anything down.
Couldn't you use a report to get the item number and then go that and then use the API?
Yeah, so I think that's 2 layers of complexity I don't need. So for now, that's working. I might have to poke at the API a little more. I think that you may be able to get the API, use the API to get the item number, and then use that to insert the data, but I haven't figured that part out yet.
Well, it looks like the API does have a item barcode object.
Yeah, it's the external ID. I saw that, but I couldn't get any data from it
Oh, okay.
yet. So I fell back on my use of reports because I understand that a little better.
Cool. Any other reports things? Anyone have any bugs that they want to talk about? I saw that it looks like the ability to attach the cover image at an item level has had some, I think it's been,
I think it's in the system now, isn't it? It's in 2105.
I think there's been some work on making it like easier to drag and drop.
yeah.
Oh no, that
Yeah,
would
drag
be
and
cool.
drop cover image upload has been pushed to master for 2205 so that you don't have to.
So you don't have to
Open
know
a
the
little-
file name like an animal, right?
Yeah, you can just drag and drop it from the folder that you've got. Which like would have been really helpful for us when we updated all of our like kit images so that they were all the same size, because we were pulling them out to our website using a report basically and a WordPress plugin. And when we did that, it was the pictures were wildly different sizes because they'd been taken over years by various different people. And so Koha had, normalized them because some of them were like the same size as what Koha shrinks everything to, but a bunch of them were way bigger. And so then you'd have like regular Koha sized image, giant image right next to each other in a slider. And so we had to redo all of those.
I think I dealt with that issue on our system by setting a max width CSS so that the images could be no wider than a certain size.
Oh yeah.
That way it didn't matter. That way I didn't have to police image size, I guess. I didn't have to adjust image sizes by changing the images when I was loading them. I just had to make sure that I just let the CSS handle the sizing for me.
Let's see. I'm just looking at, oh yeah, there's the bug 23655 that Christopher Brandon had suggested a while ago. I'm loading it up and then I can put the link in the chat, which is to tie account renewals to patron modification requests as an option, where there's been some discussion on that for the first time in a while, where like a setting can be created to determine if self-renewals are allowed and can even limit based on patron categories and home libraries. And then a setting if renewals, if there's no charge, can be automatic. So if there's like it's time to renew, they can fill out the, like, go to make requests and one of the options can just be like renew my card, everything stayed the same. And I think that's really interesting. That would really help us with a lot of stuff. especially for patrons at branches that aren't open as much. Has anyone heard when 2111 updates are happening for Bywater customers?
The information I was given suggested approximately June.
Yeah, I think early adopters was late June or mid-June. I don't remember. I wrote it down. It's
Somewhere.
not in front of me though. But yeah, I think they said early adopters was June and test servers were June, and then July, August for non-early adopters.
Does anyone have any other bugs they wanted to talk about, or any other systems things they wanted to talk about today?
Well, I'm just curious if anyone else is having problems with patrons receiving their email notifications after Bywater changed over to the Amazon way of delivering the email. They sent us a whole bunch of things to put in our DNS records, things I don't understand, but CNAMEs and stanzas and whatnot. And so our IT department did that. And it seemed like things improved, but now we're getting a lot of upset patrons who are not receiving specifically their whole pickup notifications. And so then they don't get it. And so they miss out on getting Patterson. And so they get mad and, you know, that kind of thing. And I just didn't know if it was, you know, it's maybe something just with our setup, but I didn't know if anybody else was having issues.
No, we still have those problems too.
Okay.
Email just kind of sucks in general.
Yeah, I would say we're actually having less problems since the Amazon switch overall. But not you know, still having problems. And I think that's probably just the email issue. But we're definitely having fewer problems than we had before, but we were getting a ton of bounce backs because like lots of people use their like university emails from around here, and they had really strict things. So about once a month we had to contact their security people and be like, can you please take us off the spam list because we're not spam? And then like 5 weeks later we'd have to do it again. And so we're not having that problem anymore. I see in the chat Jennifer says that they're still having problems.
Okay, well, at least I know I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which is not good,
I'd
but-
agree that we're having less problems, but still having problems. I had an interesting problem come up with one of my library staff members. She was getting aggressive item due text messages, and so like every hour it would remind her that the same item was due until she returned it. But it seems like it was just her, hopefully. But if you guys notice that, we should probably nip that in the bud.
And I'm not sure we have everything really set up to know when things bounce. When you say you get notified of bounces or you know about it, where are you getting that information? Because I'm not sure we've got things really, you know, what we see is in the patrons notices, it says it's sent.
Yeah,
And-
so ours get sent from notices@latahlibrary.org, which is an email address that we can log into. So we have someone who part of her job is that every day she logs in, she prints out any notices that need printing because Bywater has set it up so that those get emailed to her in like one document. So it's kind of minimal editing to print the ones that need to be printed. And then if And then she also checks to see bounce back notices, and she'll like expire people's accounts and put a note that's like, hey, we got a notice that unless it's got the thing that's like, hey, you've been marked as spam by ICANN or whatever, then we could just go in and request to be not spam again. But if someone's texts, we also get text bounces. So she can go in and do notes for that as well and expire them so that like the next time they come in, before they can check out, we have to talk to them about it. Makes it really obvious.
And so you're getting that all sent to the email address you set up?
Yeah.
So yeah, we had asked our IT department to do that, and we had a disgruntled, and well, not disgruntled, but he was retiring and just didn't have the time and wanted to have me prove why I needed this. And we went back and forth, and finally I'm like, just set it up. And so he said he did, but I don't think anything's ever worked because he wasn't really, he didn't really care. So we are working on that, but so that's on my city side. But what do I need to tell Bywater, or is there a system setting that maybe I don't know about that on the Koha side?
There's a system preference called ReturnpathDefault. And you can put an email in there that'll let you, it'll catch the bounce backs. If you don't populate that in the library settings, you can also designate a return path.
Yeah, and I think we've got that set up because I remember, saying, I think I've got everything set up, and yet we're not getting any, notices to this address that was supposedly created. That,
and
so
I
I think that's part of my problem.
Yeah, I've got
A way
my
to
email
test it.
address there, so I do get all the bounce backs for our system.
A way to test it is to just use your email. Just one night, use your email and see if you get anything. And if you're getting things and the email address you want it to go to isn't getting anything, then there's a problem with that email address.
And if you're not getting anything, then that might mean that either a setting's wrong or, well, yeah, that probably means that there's a setting wrong.
Or it might mean every single email going out is going out successfully. It might mean that there's nothing wrong.
If that's the case,
sinister problem
is yourself for a few days, because occasionally we don't get bounce backs for a day or two.
Yeah, the problem I have is that each library is getting all of their own bounce messages. They're all going to, 40 different email addresses. There isn't one centralized place. And so I only hear about problems with people's email addresses third hand.
Mm-hmm.
Patron says, I'm not getting my emails. What do you mean I had a book on hold? I never got an email about it. So they tell the staff member, and then occasionally that's the staff member that contacts me. But usually what happens is they tell the patron tells a staff member tells a supervisor, and then the supervisor contacts me. And so I've got like 3 or 4 layers between myself and the person that's actually having the problem. And that makes it hugely difficult to figure out the problems. Generally, what I tell people is I can see that Koha sent it, and if they didn't get it, that's because their spam filters are turned up to 11. It's either at their ISP, their email provider is blocking it in such a way that they're never getting to it, or it's getting to their junk mail and they're not checking it. So that's what I generally tell people, because I'm so far removed from the borrower that I have no idea really what's going on, and it's really hard to track down.
So our patrons will, say, no, it's not in spam, you just never sent it, and blah, blah, blah. So I know that they can check their junk mail and okay, it's not there, but is there a way for anybody to know that their email provider is blocking things?
No, I mean, usually the bounce back might tell you that.
Yeah, maybe. Usually if their email provider is blocking things, there's usually a bounce message coming back to the sending address.
Yeah,
and it usually has a code in it, and the code means something.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to have like a degree in cryptography to understand the code, because each each email provider seems to use similar but slightly different codes. And so it really takes a lot of investigative work to figure out that the reason they didn't get it is because their spam filters are turned up to 11.
I know one thing we'll recommend to our patrons too is we'll tell them to add notices at laytellibrary.org to their contacts, because if you're getting an email from someone you have as a contact, it's less likely to go into your spam, and might even get through, depending on the ISP, that might also change things. And so we've had some success with that, where especially with Gmail, where it probably was going into the spam, but they weren't seeing it until after the spam had been emptied, or they weren't noticing that they had a problem until after the spam had been emptied. And so we have had success with that for at least some of our patrons.
Okay, that's at least something else. My circulation supervisor is just, really frustrated. Well, we're both frustrated with it. And then, you think you've got it working, and then a couple months down the line, it's like, there's this darn problem again. And so that's something else we haven't tried that we can definitely try. So cool. Thank you.
And that also always makes, like our circ staff does that, but then we usually, they'll still tell me usually. And so we can kind of follow up and see what else is going on and try to track down, like if there was a bounce back at some point that the note didn't get put on their account or something. I mean, I don't know that we've actually found that, but it makes the patron feel like we're trying something, even if there's not much we can do. We're listening and we have at least something that they can try. And I think that helps a lot for making like the patrons feel heard and the circ staff feel like they're not just getting told, well, you're out of luck. And I see in the chat, we used to take daily backup and get email. So I've taken the koha backup today.
Oh, I have a slightly email related question.
Mhm.
So Koha lets you automate sending 3 overdue notices with the triggers, right? Is there a way to automate additional messages? Like, is there a plugin or something that does that?
Like for custom messages or something?
Yeah.
I feel like I remember there being enough.
The email plugin that I know of, you can run a report and get a batch of email addresses and then stick those email addresses into the plugin and then create a message that'll just go to those patrons that you put in that group.
Okay.
But it's not automated. You have to run the tool. You have to run the plugin each time.
I thought I remembered there was something.
That's the one that I'm aware of.
I feel like I remember in a koha update a couple years ago, there was something that I don't think it's that one, that was going to add the ability to do that from within koha for some things. Of course, it'll probably take me forever to find it, but in the meantime, in the chat there was a question about, we used to take backups every day. So if I've taken koha backup today, can I delete yesterday's backup, or should I keep all the backup files? And I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, most of us, SUNITA, work with the company that does the backups for us, Bywater. Most of us are Bywater Solutions customers. And I know that what Bywater does is they do a backup daily and then once a month they do a complete backup of our server. And my recollection is that Bywater always kept like a month's worth of backups. That way we could, you know, if we had an outage, if something happened and they needed to restore from a backup, there was always a good set of backups that they could fall back onto. So I don't know, from managing a system standpoint, I don't know how far back the best practice is for keeping daily backups of Koha, but I think that Bywater is doing it for 30 days. And I think then once a month they're doing a full server image backup. So that way there's always a backup of the most current database and the previous month's worth of data, but there's also a backup regularly of the actual disk image of the server, so that the whole server can be restored quickly if the whole server crashes.
Okay, I found in 1905 there was a bug to generate and send custom notices based on report output. It adds a cron job which takes a report ID and a notice code to be used to send custom emails to users generated from the report content. Can only use columns, but can use any columns that are in the report, but only those columns. User email addresses and the from address can be sent from there. And it must use template toolkit. So if you wanted to send like another overdue, a fourth overdue notice, you could do it using this report. And you just have to get Bywater to set up the cron job for you.
Okay.
Because I know we had talked about using this for like when patrons get a lost item charge manually, like if they came in and said, hey, we lost this book, can you guys assess it? Because they can either pay the Koha price when they report that it's lost, or they can have our librarians assess the fee, and sometimes it's less because like if it's not a brand new book, it's going to have circed some, and maybe it's circed a lot, and so they're not going to charge much at all. And so we had talked about maybe setting up a report that would say, hey, if it was added by a librarian instead of by a cron job and is a lost or damaged type, send this email notice. We have not gotten around to doing that, but actually that might be something to talk about again.
I have a library coming up and they have like a series of 5 notices built into their policy. So I'm trying to just push them towards the 3. But I do have another library that sends additional notices after the initial 3, and they manually generate the other 2. So this might cut down on some work.
Yeah.
Good to know about.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there. It's just, figuring out how you want to do it.
Like we have everybody self-registers and then comes to the desk and gets their card. And it seems like maybe that would be something we're talking about, sending, a welcome email. And there's been some work on a bug recently on sending a welcome email to self-registration, but I don't think it would work with our process. So maybe something like that where I could use the report to get the new registrations and then send a custom, welcome email.
Yeah, and I actually have a report that I use to check. When we had paper applications, we had somebody go through and check to make sure everything was filled out correctly in the system. And when we switched to only self-registration in March of 2020, I think Bywater helped us write a report that checked the action logs for anyone that had been changed from self-registered to any other category. So you could probably use a report like that to figure out who you need to do that for, you know, have set up the job to run overnight and say anyone who got changed from self-registered to any other patron type in the last 24 hours gets the self-registration new email. Or you might even be able to have it send the same original, like the same one you would send someone who staff just made their account. You probably don't have to have a custom notice, but you'd have to make sure that the welcome email only used template toolkit, I think. I mean, I'm sure Bywater could tell you more. But
Good idea.
I'm
Thank
thinking,
you.
doesn't self-registration send the same email that the account details email to new borrowers?
Yeah, that's the bug that they've been working on, is that after you self-register, you would get the account details, because my understanding is right now it only worked if staff was manually registering the patron, and that way they would, if you had the account details set up, they would get it, but through self-registration it doesn't go, and I've tested that and it doesn't. So they've worked on the bug to make that happen. But it's got some, I think it's some patron registers, and they're they get a email to confirm in order to get the account.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking of. There is an email that goes out when they self-register, the verification email.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's different than the account details email, isn't it? We used the self-registration for a few months in the beginning of the pandemic, but we had one library that was so vehemently opposed to the idea that people can sign up for their own cards, and there's no way to turn it on. There's no good way to make it available for some libraries and not available for others that fits our situation.
I mean,
So there's
the
no way
system
that
preference.
fits our situation.
Yeah.
Because what happens if the patron, it's just complicated. It's because of one library that, you know, wants to throw that spanner in the works for everybody else every time there's a good idea.
Could just remove them as an option from the home library drop down.
Yeah, and then their argument against that is, but then people that, you know, should have our home library, that should be our patrons, that should inflate our statistics, are going to sign up with the library that's 4 miles away. They're going to self-register at that library, and then there'll be somebody else's statistic, but they should be ours because this is the town they live in. That's the argument against that. So they were just a pain in the ass about it. So
I wonder, it would probably be overcomplicated, but I wonder if you could write some jQuery that would hide the home library field and select it based on the address of the patron.
yeah, it sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm not up for that.
Fair enough.
Well, and the issue there is that these two towns they share a border, they overlap. There are some patrons that might have an address in one town that actually live in the taxing area of the other town.
Yeah, and that's a problem we have too.
Up there. Yeah, it's a problem you guys have with Julietta and Kendrick.
Yeah,
and other places on the Latah County border. And
yeah, where their address is in Genesee, but they actually live in Nez Perce County.
Yeah.
Which is like the county just south of Latah. And so they need to actually have a Nez Perce address and not or have to have a Nez Perce Prairie River Library District home library instead of a Latah County Library home library.
There's one family I worked with when I was in Latah County that they live in Latah County. Their farm is in Latah County, but their address, their mail has a Farmington, Washington mailing address because they are in a corner of Latah County that you can't physically get to other parts of Latah County to without driving through the state of Washington. So
Yeah.
they had a lot of headaches because of that. Well, you live in Idaho, but you got a Washington address? What? That's screwed up, man.
Okay, well, we've gone over a little bit. I think we can probably go ahead and end the recording. Oh, our next meeting is April 12th. April 12th. Same time, same place. And I will end the recording now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.